Okay, before we get started, do me a favor real quick and hit that bell. Thanks. So it's now been 20 years since Starcraft came out and rocked the gaming world. And it's crazy to think that the game that is still sitting on the top 10 best-selling PC games of all time and is the oldest by 2 years was once the butt of all the jokes in the gaming industry, and it got laughed out of E3 in 1996. How exactly did that happen? How exactly did Blizzard get it together and get this game out in such a state that it came out in compared to what it was gonna be? And more importantly, how did the lessons Blizzard learned making the original Starcraft eventually influence future titles? Alright, now since I get the feeling that a few of you have no idea what I'm talking about, we're gonna have a quick history lesson on all things craft. So come 1994, a company named Silicon and Synapse decides to be called Blizzard. We've covered this in previous videos. They come out and fire some shots across the bow at the already popular Westwood studio by jumping into the RTS genre with a game called Warcraft. It was cute, but the RTS war had just started. Some of these games came out within years of each other. Back to back, Command & Conquer, Warcraft, Command & Conquer Red Alert, Warcraft II. The games were being put out so quickly to keep up with any sort of edge they could create over their competitor that oftentimes there wasn't any serious progress between games. You can especially see this with some of the Command & Conquer titles in their expansions, but at least Blizzard was making some steady progress until 1996. Blizzard showed off their latest game at E3 1996 to universal mockery. Dubbed Warcraft Goes Purple, or Orcs in Space, the original Starcraft was a hot mess. The sprites looked awful, the color coding made it hard to look at and nearly impossible to figure out what was where. And overall, it pretty much looked like a really poorly done conversion mod for the Warcraft II game. In some of the screenshots, the level of artistic detail was all over the place, and in other ones, it was just a mystery as to how someone thought this was a good idea to put out. And while I can't exactly tell you what was going on in the heads of Blizzard Entertainment when they released this to the public at E3, I can tell you that at the time, games were not something you spent a lot of time on, and 18 months was considered an extremely long development period. Back then, graphics cards were a rare thing and not even standardized yet in computers, so for the most part you were just working with sprites and simple engines just based on processing power alone. The god-awful screenshots and very unpromising looking gameplay wasn't Blizzard's only problem though. Initially, the thing that we now know to be called the Zerg was originally called the Unspeakable Evil, and then later on they decided to call it the Zerg, with a U. Now, somebody took some serious issue with that. Somebody that was the most ferocious intellectual property rights enforcers known to man, and somebody that was about to make a sequel to their hugely successful 3D cartoon movie. Yep, that's right. Disney got pissed off that Zerg was being used for something that they were going to use in Toy Story 2, which was currently in development. Two entities both called Zerg, one of which is an evil swarm of aliens in a sci-fi universe, and the other is an evil emperor set in a sci-fi universe. But somehow, whoever the council was at Blizzard at this time, I'm gonna go look them up because they deserve a gold star for this one. They convinced Disney that Zerg with an E is phonetically distinct from Zerg with a U. Like, say that out loud right now, just without thinking about it. Say them. Zerg. Zerg. It's crazy to even think about or consider that actually lawyers saved StarCraft. None of this would have been able to happen if Disney just shut them down. But that's how it happened. Some really clever counsel was able to convince Disney's army of lawyers that they were able to both exist at the same time. To Blizzard's credit, in the face of all the mockery, poor design choices, and very near misses fighting copyright enforcement giants, they took it all in stride and ended up going right back to the drawing board working on the game. Immediately after the E3 presentation of 1996, they pretty much redid the whole thing. The sprites and other graphics looked a lot more detailed, and things just kept on getting improved from there. Eventually, they went with new designs for selecting units, which got changed again. Background got drastically improved, and eventually we got to what we know now as Starcraft. Not only have the graphics and aesthetic been insanely overhauled to allow you to see a lot of stuff at a given time and easily differentiate between all factions and units, but the game had amazing balance and a compelling story as far as video games in the late 90s went, and just an overall good time. StarCraft also had amazingly good hotkey controls, and some of the best I've seen even to this day. They were extremely easy to remember, extremely easy to use, and went perfectly and literally hand in hand with using the mouse along with the keyboard. Paired with the map builder, which allowed you to make your own scenarios, StarCraft became a worldwide phenomenon. We've all seen the pictures in South Korea of the crazy broodwar tournaments they had, and I remember even a decade after StarCraft came out, it was still my main game. We'd all get together at the Boys and Girls Club and play Spawn TD or Golems in the computer room at the Teen Center. And unfortunately for all of us who love the StarCraft franchise, for some reason it's just so disaster prone. Which brings us to our next major disaster that wasn't averted, StarCraft Ghost. Ghost was an extremely ambitious project originally for the GameCube, where Blizzard outsourced the development to another firm. Unfortunately, after hopping a couple firms and many years with many updates and many very promising things, it just never came out. I remember younger me joking with the guys at the game store that I was treating my reservation for this game as a sort of low-interest CD because my mom was an accountant and I thought that was funny. And even back then, I wasn't so much disappointed when I finally found out that StarCraft Ghost got canceled, as much as like, well, I guess it finally happened. A lot of companies tried to make tactical shooters around that time, including the XCOM franchise and Command & Conquer. And out of all of them, of all the companies that didn't normally do shooter-type games that tried to make a tactical shooter, Command & Conquer Renegade was the only one of these games to see the light of day. And if you haven't played it yet, it's totally worth the price of admission for the Command & Conquer collection on Origin, which is the cheapest way you can get all these games. The unintended side effect of Ghost getting canceled was that we were starting to get some serious blue balls coming to a next fix in the StarCraft franchise. Yeah, there were teasers all over the place, like that one secret ending in the original Warcraft 3, but nothing really concrete. If you were like me, you poured through the books, you looked at all the other media, and you were just sitting there going, when are we gonna get our fix? And then we finally saw the stuff for StarCraft II Wings of Liberty, and hype through the roof. StarCraft II Wings of Liberty somehow managed to live up to all the hype that had been building for the last 12 years concerning a StarCraft game. The way they handled the campaign and the missions was amazingly executed, and I loved how they did upgrades in that game. The multiplayer was fun, although it wasn't really my scene. And overall, even though, again, StarCraft games are not exactly known for their story, it was a nice continuation. It was great to see a lot of the characters from the books show up in StarCraft II. Multiplayer was I didn't play much of it back in the day. I remember being Gold League, but then slipping down a bit. I was more into watching the competitive scene than I was actually playing it, which it was a good time to be a competitive StarCraft II fan. Brood War kind of had that issue right before StarCraft II came out because a big match-fixing scandal came through. And while there were a few hiccups with balancing, particularly I remember there being a big fuss over how much energy the Templars should get when they were first made, it was a great time. Too bad they totally soiled the bed with Heart of the Swarm. As much as I like the StarCraft franchise, and as much as I tried to enjoy Heart of the Swarm, I can't help but feel that this was more just practice work and ground laying for Heroes of the Storm, which also, who forgot to have an interdepartment meeting where they realized that they both have the exact same acronym? Like, how does that happen? How is communication inside of your compound that bad? And on top of that, it really feels like a lot of the stuff in Heart of the Swarm was just testing for the MOBA that would eventually become Heroes of the Storm. It seems less focused on your innumerable broods and more on, hey, let's level up Kerrigan. Let's give Kerrigan new abilities. Let's go get Kerrigan re-infested as a new special kind of Zerg so she'll have powerful psionic abilities and strong armor everywhere except her shapely buttocks. And a lot of the time, you're more focused on goofing around with Kerrigan than you actually are building like I believe 600 zerglings now because you got that sweet upgrade. And there are some levels in Heart of the Swarm where there are literally 2 armies of creeps slamming against each other in the middle of the map, and that's part of the objective, is deal with the creeps in the middle of the map. I understand that MOBA games, particularly Dota and League of Legends, were all the rage around the time that Heart of the Swarm came out, and maybe Blizzard's feeling a bit salty that they may believe that the MOBA genre was originally made in Starcraft, which, but they really needed to focus on making their RTS game a good RTS game. While Heart of the Swarm still scored high, it was the lowest scored out of all the StarCraft games, and it really just left us wanting something more. At least, Legacy of the Void gave us that, and while I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of how they modified the previous Heart of the Swarm campaign for Legacy of the Void, I really loved the Spear of Adun and how it always looked like something was going on in there and you could see people going to do things, or if you hung out enough, a Colossus would come up to your war room and see what's going on the bridge. The upgrade system was certainly the best out of all 3 games, but I just missed the freedom that you had with Wings of Liberty. For instance, after you play through a few times, you realize there's a certain order you can do the missions in Wings of Liberty where you can have a lot of fun with overpowered units. Also, I didn't find out until my most recent playthrough to get footage for this video, but Dr. Hansen will actually have something to say all the way up until the end of the game if you never finish her story arc. All that being said though, you still can have a great time playing the StarCraft campaigns and the Nova Ops that came out, and the recently released co-op commander mode is a bunch of fun if you've got somebody to play it with. Blizzard seems keen on supporting the StarCraft franchise too, especially with the remaster we got in 2017 and all the new items and cosmetics you can get for the game as long as your current was competitive. They don't seem to be slowing down. Now, I don't necessarily know if we'll ever see a StarCraft III or a new set of mission packs outside of co-op, but I don't see any reason why we'd have to worry about losing StarCraft anytime soon. One last thing before we wrap this video up. I know a few of you have probably already put comments on this video about a certain Nintendo 64 item that I completely glossed over. Well, that's because StarCraft 64 wasn't a major disaster or any sort of blunder. StarCraft 64 was a product of its time. You have to remember that both Command & Conquer and XCOM, as well as a few other real-time strategy games, were all ported to console. Just, it was a thing to do back then. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, etc., and tell me what you think in the comments. Don't forget to check out the Discord if you really want to join the conversation, and Patreon donations are always appreciated. See you in the next video. What are you doing? What are you doing? I just washed that tablecloth. Oh wow, I'm not getting mauled. I'm just gonna sit here. Look at all that fluff. Hey, no claws, no claws. What's up there? Okay, you're not in the mood for pets. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Alright, I've got things to do, so I'm gonna let you just be a little silly.